Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of the Gamut Network. I know I say this thankfully quite often, but many of the people that I have had the privilege of knowing during my journey have now become part of my life. And I'm lucky enough to call this woman a dear friend, a mentor, a guide, a sounding board, and all of the above. So it is an absolute honor to have my dear friend, Debra Ruh, on the show today. Hi, Debra.
Hi, Mindy. Thank you for having me. I was so
And
excited about your new show.
oh my God, it's so fun. I couldn't wait to have you on the show. And of course, please, everybody, look at this fabulous hair. I mean, does it get better than that? Is that not joyful? I love it so much. I
It's like,
can't wait to see what it looks like every time I see it, but it's gorgeous.
thank you, thank you. I
I
figure,
love it.
I wanted to let it go natural, and because I wanted younger women to know that it's okay to get over 60. It's going to be okay. But at the same time, I am an artist and I love being creative. So I have this pretty purple in. My hair's a little long right now as we're sheltering in place, but so what?
I
That's
love
fun
it.
too.
I love it. Debra, can you take us back and share with us your personal story, how your journey began? I think it will set us up to get to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. Well, my husband and I had our first child when I was 28 years old, and I had tried for like 5 years. And when we knew that we were pregnant. I was so excited and terrified, and never really worried about anything going, wrong or different. But the reality was, my oldest daughter, my only daughter, was born with Down syndrome. So we didn't get the diagnosis at first. We didn't get the diagnosis till she was 4 months old. But I will tell you just an interesting thing. After I'd given birth to her, right after I'd given birth, this little funny thought floated through my mind that said, wow, she looks like a little baby with Down syndrome. And I remember thinking, what? I don't think I've ever seen a little baby with Down syndrome, which, by the way, I think they're the cutest babies in the world, but
Delicious.
um,
I couldn't agree more.
they're
Yeah.
so cute, 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 cute. But 4 months later, when the doctors were telling us that Sarah had Down syndrome, and then what a tragedy her life was going to be. I remember being thankful that I'd gotten to know this soul for 4 months, and I totally disagreed with what they were saying about what her life would look like. And I determined that I wasn't going to listen to them. And at the time, she just had a birthday, so she's 33 years old now.
Mm.
At the time, we were still talking about institutionalizing.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
I believe that was still very much the protocol.
Right. It was still, the parents were not doing it as much, but it was still, the conversation came up when they were telling us. And so they were saying most people don't institutionalize. And I'm thinking, come after my baby. I dare you to come after. I'll hold her and fight you, and I'm going to win for sure, because this was my perfect baby, and she's still my perfect baby. And 15 months after Sarah was born, surprise, I also had a son, Kevin, who is just a delight and a wonder. But and it was very good for me too, because I wanted to dedicate my life for Sarah. Sometimes when parents dedicate their lives to a child, it becomes burdensome to the child,
Mm-hmm.
the adult.
True. It's a
But
really good point.
yeah, because she actually wants to be like a different person from me. But it's been a very interesting journey. And I fought everybody that told me what she couldn't do. And I kept saying, well, you don't know if she can do that. Why don't you get out of the way and let her show you what she can do? So it's been an interesting journey. But I always raised her the same way I raised my son. And as we've walked the journey, sadly, my husband of many years, in September, we'll celebrate our 38th wedding anniversary. He's acquired early onset dementia.
Mm.
And he is getting it. He got it at an earlier age because he was hit by a car when he was a child. When he was 11 years old, he was hit by a car as he just got his kite going. He actually stepped in front of the car accidentally. The car hit him. He sustained a terrible brain injury, and he died on the scene. He was in a coma for several weeks when they brought him back, and he didn't go to school for months afterwards. It was such a bad accident. So what we know now is that if your brain takes that big of a hit, the reality is you're going to age differently. So my husband has acquired dementia, which we often talk about. Most people that have disabilities, only 20% of them are born with a disability, like my beautiful Sarah or your son Oliver.
Yes.
Most people acquire disabilities as they live these precious, amazing lives.
Very interesting statistic that actually I have not heard.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
20%.
Only 20% are born with disabilities.
Wow. 80% of people acquire. Wow.
Yes.
That's a very interesting.
Yeah, because it's part of being a human being. Your hair starts turning gray. What's that about? Something's going on with my neck. It's interesting to watch yourself age, especially in a youth culture, because, well, I think I'm very beautiful at 60. I'm very cool with who I am. And sometimes I look at the age spots and stuff and I think, wow, that's interesting. But at the same time, there's a lot of freedom that comes with aging. There's a lot of pressure that gets taken away, that the things I worried about as a younger woman, I don't worry about now.
Right.
I worry about other things, but.
Right. So now you have the beautiful Sarah, who was born with Down syndrome. You made it very clear that institutionalizing her was never an option. You defied the odds with all of the things they told you she wouldn't be able to do. I have the privilege of knowing Sarah. And boy, oh boy, were they wrong, because it turns this world on its ear. I'll tell you that, everybody. So talk to me about how that experience of having a personal experience with a child with a disability, because I know how it changed the course of my life. How did it start changing the course of your life from a professional perspective?
Well, I was in the banking industry. I was in the banking industry and technology. I love technology. Technology can be such a great equalizer. It can be a real stressor too, but I always loved technology. My father was in technology before anybody knew what technology was, with AT&T. So I grew up with a love of technology. And so I was in the banking industry and I was starting to give back, and I was a vice president, and
Debra,
I actually had
you for 1 second because you are not, okay, there you go. You weren't on the screen for a second.
Oh, wait,
okay,
sorry.
There we go. So take me back to your father was in technology.
Yes, my father was a technologist before anybody knew what a technologist was, and he worked for AT&T, and he just taught me to be very curious and to love technology. And so whenever I was doing things in the banking industry to give back and to help, but I remember there was a group that at the bank that I was with that was asking us if we wanted to employ people with disabilities. Well, I'm like, absolutely. So because I was in charge of a division, so I could do that. So I started doing it and thinking, I know I could do even more. And so I decided to leave the banking industry in early 2000 and to create a technology company that employed people with disabilities, even though I had no idea how to create a company, how to sustain a company. I had no idea what I was in for, which is good, because if I'd known how hard it was, I probably would have been too afraid to do it. So
isn't that, and that I love that point, because I absolutely agree. I think I would have always done it, and I think you would have too, even knowing how hard it is, because we're driven by passion and the future of our children and all of that. But it definitely is an uphill battle all the time.
it is. It is. And people just don't realize how hard it is. And now, of course, we're having this conversation in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, when the news is saying in the United States that 50% of small businesses will go out of business in the next 6 months. Well, small business is the backbone of the United States. And so there's a lot of change. There's a lot of change. And But if you have the passion and you know what your purpose is, it's like, well, I'm going to do it. So just get out of my way.
Great. So you start, tell me what year we're in now that you started this technology platform.
Well, and I'm also going to tell you another thing that I thought was interesting. I know technology, and so I thought, well, if I'm going to create a business, I'm going to create a technology business. So I created a business to build websites because that was in 2000,
Mm.
2001, and the websites were still relatively new, and there were a lot of people that didn't have websites. There were also a lot of web developers on the market. There's so many more now, but at the time. And so I thought, well, we'll do that. That'll make a lot of sense. And then I heard about this law, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, that had just been updated in 2001. And there was this section 508, which the United States government could not buy, build, or, buy, build, or recreate technology that wasn't accessible to everyone, including citizens with disabilities. And so I thought, well, what would be really cool? We're technologists and we're building websites. We should make sure that websites are fully accessible. Who to know better than us? And so that's what Tech Access, TEC Access did. It was a made up name. But I will tell you, Mindy, when I first started, I was so excited to be coming in to help the community of people with disabilities. I felt that I was part of the community, being a parent, but I was told at the time, we don't really need you in here. You parents are part of the problem, and we don't really need you in here. And I was
Who was
surprised
saying
by
that?
that.
The population, people with
Yeah,
disabilities were communicating that.
it wasn't really people with disabilities. It was leaders that were there to help people with disabilities. They didn't really want anybody in their space.
Hmm.
So I thought, I don't see a lot of progress, and I certainly don't see progress on employment. And so I'm coming in anyway. So you better scoot over and make room, because
Yes.
sometimes people don't want you coming in behind them, because maybe you'll take some.
And certainly telling them how to do it better, which is
That's right. That's right.
what you
Yeah.
were doing.
Yes. So and that's one thing about entrepreneurship. You have to keep learning as you walk the path. You have to keep learning. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make huge mistakes, usually, if you're an entrepreneur. I have made so many mistakes, but learn from your mistakes and keep growing and keep trying to make a difference. I think the world would be a better place if everybody tried a little bit harder to make a difference for other people.
Agreed. So now this is, I want to just pause for a second on the timeline, because what you were suggesting was really ahead of the curve of, and we're not even there yet now in 2020, of the necessity of making websites compliant for people with disabilities, so that everybody can find the functionality and be able to access the internet on the same playing field. So you were relatively 20 years ahead of where the world hasn't even reached yet. But I just needed to make that note, because I think a lot of the things that you do, especially with your company that we'll talk about in a minute, Ruh Global Impact, you have always been ahead. And of the knowledge of, again, marrying your knowledge of technology, your knowledge of the population of people with disabilities, both personally and professionally, to make the world better and more inclusive for everybody. So take me to that kind of how did you get from this technology company that focused solely on websites to Ruh Global Impact, and share with everybody what exactly does Ruh Global Impact do?
Well, one thing I noticed as we walked this path with Tech Access was, in the first place, the majority of my employees were people with disabilities. So over 80% of the team always were people with
And
disabilities.
all different types of disabilities?
All different types. We had interns that were blind and deaf. We had, people were blind, quadriplegic, paraplegic, autism. It was all over the board. It was very, very diverse in the biggest sense of the word. And we were very successful with corporations. I built it to a multi-million dollar business, so we were very successful. We always had cash flow problems, which is something that entrepreneurs live with, that 3 o'clock in the morning where you're thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay payroll. Oh my God. So it's frightening, that sometimes being an entrepreneur, but and then we started approaching, we were also looking at hardware accessibility and software accessibility. And now, of course, we had, at the time, we didn't have mobile. We weren't doing mobile apps and stuff like that, So eventually we started doing that. But I remember at one point, one of my really large global clients had said, Deborah, we run this part of the division in this gigantic global company like a nonprofit. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, we never have enough money. We're always something that they have to do because it's compliance. And every year our budget gets a little smaller. And I remember thinking, y'all really need to talk about this marketing and branding wise, because this is good for your brand. And I started thinking about it at the time. And then the financial crisis of 2008-9 happened. And the bank I was with in 2010 failed. It was a local Virginia bank. I owed them $200,000 a loan, but the regulators stepped in. They closed the bank. And so they called my note overnight. And 2 weeks later, not only did I owe $200,000, which I'd had no way of getting, but they gave me $20,000 penalty and interest for not paying it right when they called the note. And so they wound up, because they were in trouble, getting me in trouble, which, we're all connected. That happens. And so I didn't, we merged with another company that also employed people with disabilities. And all of my employees got protected. My family and I lost so much money. Other people lost money. I almost lost my home. I had to negotiate my way out of losing the home. There was bankruptcy. It was horrible. But I protected my employees with disabilities. So at the time, I could protect somebody. I could protect the people that had lent me money. I could protect my employees, but I couldn't take all these talented employees and throw them into the marketplace at the time, because there were 16 million Americans that had been laid off. And I knew it was going to be very difficult for them. And I didn't want to do that. So I protected the employees. Sadly, other people lost money, and that's always a shame when people lose money. But I went and worked for this other company, and I stayed with that other company for like 18 months. And I never forgot the comment that person had made about a nonprofit. So I thought, I'm going to create a company it's going to be a strategy firm, and it's going to be about marketing and branding. And we're going to tell the stories of the corporations that are including us. We look at it from three pillars, including us as employees and everything that means: accommodations, retention, promotions, and making sure everything's accessible, your website, your HR process, all of that, your customers, making sure you're listening to your customers and including your customers with disabilities, and making sure your products and your services work for people with disabilities, and that you're marketing to us. And then the third one, and they're all combined, is the branding and the marketing. So what stories are you telling? And by the way, most people with disabilities have invisible or hidden disabilities. And most people do. I think it's about 80% once again. And so, but there are times when you need to use people in your advertising and your marketing that have visible disabilities, so that when you put the ads out, it's clear that you deliberately included people with disabilities. So a lot of brands are very conscious about including diversity, including men and women, people of different colors, people, they're always trying to make sure they're having diversity included. Are you including people that are from Asia? Are you including people from Latin America? Or Hispanics? Are you including people with disabilities? There's a time when you want to use people with visible disabilities, so we understand what you're talking about.
It's very clear.
Right, right. It's very clear.
Mm.
And so I got very engaged in social media and telling the stories of other people that were making a difference, like you, Mindy. When I heard about what you were doing, I wanted to help. So we're sort of strategy and compliance, but we're on a global level. So we work with global brands to help them create programs that include people with disabilities as employees, as customers, and you're doing it with your brand. And that's one reason why we like Gamut, because we're not a PR agency or like that. We're really more of marketing, and we're really more of strategists.
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to make sure that I underscore is that the beauty of Rue Global Impact is that you support the internal teams, that you are not coming in to replace anybody, or that would really almost be counterintuitive, right? You want to come in and help support the teams that already exist on how to do this, to bring in new customers, to help support employees with disabilities. And that is such a benefit to the companies. And certainly one thing that I wanted to highlight, because that only betters the company and the employees of the company by having Rue Global Impact come and be a partner and support. And that is such a critical asset to what you can offer brands and companies out there.
Right. And another point that we see is you can actually get in big trouble using the wrong language. You have to understand what language the community prefers depending upon where you are in the world. For example, we all want people first language, person with a disability. But in the United Kingdom, they use disabled people. Here in the United States, we prefer to use people first. So people with this, a person that is blind, a person that is deaf. And so understanding the language is very important. And there's a lot of ways that corporate brands can get in trouble using the wrong language. We see it all the time. And so there's so many nuances and there's so many moving parts, which is why I do partner with you, because what we don't do is we won't go and find you, a model with a disability to, showcase I would come to you for that. That's not what we would do. We're strategists. So we work with very large multinational corporations. We've also worked with governments. We're very engaged with the UN and the UN agencies and
I've had the
university.
privilege of going to your events in Washington, and I mean, you are a force and revered truly, not only in the population of people with disabilities, but also from a highly respected in the International Labor Organization, and something that I just love so much, and why I wanted to highlight you on the show, is that look at how Sarah shaped your life in the most beautiful, positive way, but for millions of people. Not, she shaped your life and your husband and your son, but what you did with that, and where you took it to help not only companies understand that people with disabilities are people first, they are consumers, they are employees, they are everything that everybody else is. But I just, want to applaud and acknowledge that look at what you have created of having, the beauty of having Sarah, but yet again, it could have gone in a very different direction. So I think what you have accomplished is absolutely spectacular. Now, if companies or people out there listening with disabilities want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Well, we're all over social media. And so you can find me on any of the social media platforms at Debra Ruh, Debraruh. Also, Rue Global is on all of the platforms. And so are my very, very talented team members, who, once again, we're about 90% of people with disabilities. And I learned over this journey that I am a person with a disability. I knew I was always super high strung, but I was diagnosed very late in life with ADHD. I've always struggled with depression and anxiety, which is a byproduct of ADHD, but I'm of the generation where they certainly weren't looking for girls with ADHD.
Mhm.
So I got diagnosed later on, and it certainly made a lot of sense to me. But as we age, more of us acquire disabilities. According to AARP, over the age of 65, 46% of us will have disabilities. And so we grow into our disabilities, and it's not a bad thing. It's just part of being human. So I learned so much from Sarah, and Sarah taught me things that I was actually trying to learn. I was trying to learn to stay in the moment and
Mhm.
do this and do that. Well, Sarah was always in the moment. What you get with Sarah is exactly how she's feeling. She doesn't know how to be anything other than who she is.
I love that.
She didn't
I
know how to
almost
be a
feel like
pleaser.
the community of people with Down syndrome have the most beautiful part of humanity. Like all
Yeah,
the bad stuff, I feel like was left out of them. I think
right.
that, certainly in the time I've gotten to spend with Sarah, she's so full of joy and life. And we had the privilege of having her in one of our runway shows, and she lit up that runway. I mean, lit it up.
Yes,
I felt bad for whoever was behind her because
right.
she just stole the show. And I think that should be revered. I mean, how
I agree.
beautiful is that? The best part of humanity is in this population. And I just completely applaud you for what you have accomplished. I highly recommend finding Debra on social media, explore what she's doing. Please look into Ruh Global Impact. They are game changers in what I like to refer to as that people with disabilities, or including them, is not an initiative, it's a business opportunity. And in
Yes.
the time that we are in right now, I think we could all use business opportunities. Opportunity being the operative word. Debra, before we go, I like to ask all of my the guests on my show one final question, and that's about the power of a vision board and manifesting. I would be so curious to know who or what would be on Debra Ruh's vision board.
Well, I have done vision boards. I'm very spiritual, do meditation. I do a lot, especially during this time of intense energy that we're all experiencing. But it, you know, my focus is always, how do we add more value to the world? How do we help the world evolve? How do we help? We're stronger together. We need to, not be all about the nationalism. We need to really focus together to make the world a better place, the sustainable development goals, making sure that you're not just, it's sort of like the toilet paper shortage. Go and grab all the toilet paper so you're okay. Well, or maybe, just take what you need and make sure there's enough for everybody else. And I also want to say two more things, Mindy. One thing that Sarah taught me, Sarah has this beautiful soul and she loved being the good little girl. But as she grew up, as she became an adult, she started wanting to be seen as the bad girl too. She just did not want to be seen through one lens
Mm.
of always being expected to be the good girl with the joy. So she has been a great teacher to me. I also forgot to mention our website is www.ruhglobal.com, because my team spends such a good time on that. But I would say my vision board would be all about, how do we focus on what is happening in the world and be a light in the world,
Mm.
because a lot of people are really freaked out and really scared, and we've got to be lights to each other to say, no, we got this. It's time for human beings to evolve, to do better by our planet, to be better by each other. Stop assuming people with disabilities are broken. No, they're not. And support each other. And as women, we need to support each other as well. So embracing our diversity, embracing all the beauty that we do have in the world, and learning from the things that are hard.
I love that. I love it. Debra, thank you for joining us today. I love
Thanks.
seeing that face. I love the hair. I love you. Thank you
I love you too.
so
Thank you
much.
for your work. Thank you for your work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. If you would like to be on the Gamut Network, please email us at talent@gamutmanagement.com to tell us why you'd be a great guest. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Gamut Network, as well as please follow us on social media at Gamut Management. Thank you again, Debra.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Be
Bye.
safe. Bye.